Om pramadina sandeha kim karishyami vrittiman. Utpadyante viliyante buddhischa yata jale. Om shantihi shantihi shantihi. The Avadut declares, ignorance is unreal. Therefore, how can it cause you any real doubt? Then what does the illumined yogi do with the projections of his mind? He lets them rise spontaneously and naturally, then dissolves them all back into the mind, like bubbles into water. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Resha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagatja Akanda Rupa Stiti Reva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. We welcome you all here today. It's Father's Day, as I was just reminded before the class started. So we wish divine blessings on all fathers. Of course, in our circle, particularly those divine fathers that bless us with the teachings from age to age, and for us from lifetime to lifetime, should we be so fortunate as to be in their company and receive them. That's a divine transmission that happens, that works its way into life in subtle ways over time, the fruits of spiritual life being very different than the fruits of earthly life, and certainly of worldly life, if you know what I mean by that. The world is plagued by the fruits of worldly life all around us, as we see. I heard just recently somebody turned off their TV for good, so they'll never see the news again. So I thought that was very commendable. Keep the mind on God first and foremost, and let a divine mother take care of the world. Just make sure that you're close to her, and so this divine power, this Sri Ramakrishna called her dynamic power of Brahman, can afford us the highest bliss and the deepest peace, the non-dual wisdom. And that's what we're talking about today, and what we spoke on last week for 3 hours. We studied non-duality of Tibetan Buddhism. We had taken up this chart got halfway through it by the time we ended. And also India's version of that, called Advaita Vedanta, which is, of course, what Swami Vivekananda intended to bring to us in 1893. He brought all of Vedanta and some yoga and some smatterings of Tantra and Samkhya too. But Advaita Vedanta was that a special philosophy, if it can be called that. Divine life, it might be called better. And so he brought that to us so that we could try and comprehend it. As I said last week, it's the most enigmatic piece of information that you'll ever receive from somebody who can transmit it. And the most wonderful thing that you can hear about and meditate upon. There's that beautiful chant, Shravanayapi Bahu Bir Yo Nalabbiha Shrinvato Pi Bahavo Yam Navidyuhu. I remember my teacher chanting it. It says basically, fortunate is that one who hears of the Atman, and wonderful is the one who speaks of it. But extremely blessed is the one who, having heard of it from the lips of an illumined preceptor, is able to realize it here in this very life, here and now, because it only exists here and now. It's not a matter of past, present, and future. It's beyond time, space, and causality. All of these things are people doing actions in time, space, getting cause and effect from them, and thinking themselves to be names and forms. That's Maya. Name, form, time, space, causality, as Vivekananda so nicely defined it for us, because it was being defined at the time by the Theosophists and so forth as illusion. But he said actually it's rather a matter of fact. There's a path, Shristi Stiti Vada in India, along with some 35, 40 other paths that are philosophical paths that are different from the darshanas, the 6 orthodox darshanas and so forth. They accompany people. It's kind of the way they walk, the way they think philosophically. Well, there's one of these particular paths that says that the world is real as long as you behold it. But as soon as you don't behold it, it's not real anymore. So there was a contention going on between people, the world's an illusion. No, the world is actually factual, So this path came along and sort of saved everyone. It says, well, it's real as long as you're here and you behold it, but you'll be gone soon. In deep sleep, in death, in samadhi, if you're so fortunate again. And then the world won't be there for you anymore, just like it isn't tonight in deep sleep. So you could say then maybe the conclusion of the Advaita Vedanta would be, ultimately it's not real. Temporarily, you could give it some credence. But people cling to it. Father of yoga called that abhinivesha. It's the 5th of all the hells. 5th, deepest, darkest. Tamisra, they call it. Of all hells is to cling to life, or to have fear of death, whichever way you want to put that. So a spiritual aspirant particularly should be free of that fear, which is why I just chanted. The Avadut declares this ignorance, this fear, it's unreal. So why should it bother you? And you should consider it that way and be done with it. And like Jesus said, get thee behind me, all devilish things, get thee behind me. And just go to those souls who speak about Brahman and hear that from their lips in their illumined preceptor and get yourself free. Then you can live, they say, in any mode you want. You can live as a monk, as a householder, as a mendicant, as a wanderer, as a forest dweller, with children, without children, with a companion, without a companion, old or young. You can be learned or illiterate. They go on, deciding all these things about how you can live once you get Jivan Mukta. That's the goal of spiritual life, is to get yourself free. Free means free from bondage, and so therefore not bound to name and form, not bound to time and space, and not bound to karma, cause and effect. So nicely defined by Swami Vivekananda, and We have to bring these things up in the context of non-duality. Now, if you bring them up in the context of duality, called Advaita, or in the context of qualified non-duality, Vishishta Dvaita, then they have a little different flavor. And that's really where the Dharma comes in, at the level of qualified non-duality. Duality, probably best known for worship. See? Because now I and my Father are two, you see. And so, very rich and beautiful. Who doesn't like to go to Mass or to a Hindu puja or something like that and experience that? The devotional fervor that's there, the flavor of it, the chanting of the names of the Lord, and all of these beautiful things that are a part of the bhakti path. So qualified non-dualism would be another level, you might say, where you're interested now to know the Lord, now that you've heard of the Lord and you've sang the Lord's names, or the Mother's names, as we would say here in Sarvedam. And now you want to get closer to them, you see. You want to know them, and nobody tells you the secret yet that they're your very self. But I'm giving it away early, that I and my Father are one is really the ultimate secret and of non-duality. But there are so many things in the way to realizing that, and day to day, as I was saying, the activities that you engage in day to day also keep you at odds with that enigmatic piece of information that I and my Father are one. Who acts that way? You'd have to look at a Ramana Maharshi or a Sri Ramakrishna, or beings who have samadhi, to see someone who's completely removed the line of demarcation between matter and spirit, between creature and creator, and between God and mankind. It's gone. And only then would you believe that this non-dual truth is the ultimate goal, that it's just the last word in spiritual life. So qualified non-duality is the atmosphere we come into then when we take up the Dharma. It's a penchant. It's the mead, M-E-E-D. It's the mead of the sages and seers. They love it. And since they can't be in non-dual samadhi all the time, who can? Ramana Maharshi wasn't. Sri Ramakrishna wasn't. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, you have to come down. A bird has to come down from the sky and light on a branch to rest. So if you were to remain in non-dual samadhi all the time, your body would drop like a leaf in 11 days, they say. And only certain souls, like Sri Ramakrishna, could hold on to the body for a long time after having the experience of non-dual samadhi. It's a very, very unique soul that can do that. So for the rest of us, as we are having, and we'll look at that next week, different kinds of sampragyata samadhis, seated samadhis. The unseated samadhi, very rare, few get that and have that. And some even rarer have it more often. See, might be a once or twice in a lifetime thing for some people, for some great souls. So the seated samadhis are like, in Advaita Vedanta, we like to describe them as pointing out your deep sleep state. You are consciousness, one, undifferentiated. What's that word?
Undifferentiated.
You almost got it. My nephew from Hungary is stumbling over a few long English words and trying to understand them. Undifferentiated, so it has no differences in it. It's all one homogeneous mass of pure conscious awareness, like an ocean without waves. Or a sky without clouds. Sometimes we sing that, infinite like the sky, infinite like the sky. So that's your consciousness, and that's you. And when you're in deep sleep, swapna they call it, sushupti, you're actually that consciousness, but when you come back to the body, you don't remember it. That's why deep sleep makes you so rested. You can dream for 6 hours and wake up, as Gaudapada himself has said, Sparsha Yoga Master, you can wake up a nervous wreck. That was first coined back in 600, a nervous wreck. So that saying. So But if you go into deep sleep for just 45 minutes, you wake up refreshed and you can go for hours and hours. So they know deep sleep has this healing power of reflection. And we just don't remember where we've been when we come back to the body. So consciousness leaves its undifferentiated state, and its first level of differentiation is deep sleep. It would actually see itself among all the seeds that are possible to water. I brought that chart today with the pumpkins, you see, the pumpkin patch, and how all the seeds are, for many, many generations of pumpkins are held within it. Or you could do a watermelon, or you could do a forest. It doesn't matter. There are seeds upon seeds upon seeds, potential in that. So that's your deep sleep state. Shushupti. There's just all seeds, and you're coming out of timeless, deathless, pure conscious awareness, and the first level of, or the first world, and the first body you would see would be your subtle, your causal body, and the subtlest of the worlds of the kingdoms of heaven within you, and the seeds that are there, that will, if watered, produce the dream state for you. Because it's all dreaming from then on. See, row, row, row your boat. Life is but a dream. Even some American songwriter said that. So it's all dreaming from then on. It's just a matter of whether you're dreaming in your subtle body or you're dreaming here on earth. Ramana Maharshi said this is dream number 1 and tonight is dream number 2. So it's all a dream of the mind. It's called sankalpa, and the mind-only schools tell you about this. Welcome to the live streaming audience, by the way, from different parts of the world. You know, watching from our ashrams in Portland, San Francisco, and from places in Europe, like Iceland and far off, drinking in the nectar of non-dual truth with us. So deep sleep then is just a mass of seeds unwatered. And you have to be careful not to think of it in terms of long periods of time. You have to think the soul is still timeless there. It's about to enter time. So if it, with its mind, it has a supply of water called desires. See? And so with its mind, if it takes some of those seeds and waters it, then it's going to create the next world for itself, called swapna, dreaming. And so the consciousness is now passed from an undifferentiated state to a first phase of differentiation, and to a grosser stage of differentiation, where now you have a subtle body and subtle worlds. Now, if you were thinking kingdoms of heaven within you, and you're thinking, when I die, post-mortem emancipation, I'm going to go later to heaven, then of course you're thinking in terms of time. But you have to understand that the worlds are projected in an instant and withdrawn in an instant. We know this because Sri Ramakrishna said, when I saw Om, the word, because Jesus is teaching about the kingdoms of heaven within you, would be prefaced by, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word is with God, the Word was God. So you have to understand that when people started to think, I'm going to heaven after I die, then they think that that's a world that's actual. But this world is not actual. This world is dream number 1, and your dream you're going to tonight is also not actual, so it's swimming. Everything is swimming in it. It's not coagulated. This is coagulated. Our senses have taken the 5 elements and turned them into objects. That's at the behest of the mind, who wanted to enjoy them. See? So that's your waking state. I'm jumping the gun here a bit. But back in your dreaming state, things aren't coagulated yet. You don't have the physical senses yet. You just have the subtle senses. And you see and you speak and you hear in a dream tonight. You see, you fly in a dream. So you've got the 5 elements and the 5 senses in the subtle form there. They're called tanmatras. When Vivekananda came to the West, he said, I see, you don't know 2 things, so your philosophy is incomplete. You don't know about tanmatras, and you don't know about prana. When Christ would say, man does not live by food alone, he's trying to get people to think about Brahman. Because he's not talking about the Almighty Father. because we don't live by Brahman. We don't live by God. God is eternal life. God doesn't live because life means death, and life and death means birth. God doesn't go through those. We have to get that clear in our philosophical heads. So you can't say that when Christ said man does not live by bread alone, he's talking about the spirit. It doesn't live by the spirit. The spirit's transcendent. It's transcendent of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. So it's the mind that's projecting all of this. And the mind-only schools are the only ones that are telling us this, Buddhism and Vedanta in this case. So if you came out of consciousness in a thrice, and you saw the seeds and you watered them, and in a thrice the dream state happened, and then in that you enjoyed the dream state, and then you wanted to enjoy the waking state, there you are, your consciousness is now solidified, you have a body, you have 5 elements that have come together, because every object here is a combination of 5 elements. A little bit more water in some than others, a little bit more earth in some than others, a little bit more air and so forth. Some fire in some, like the lava some miles away here on the Big Island, where Madame Pele is raining down her liquid earth on us. So all of these things then are solidified into objects, and then they're desolidified. Everything is soluble back into Brahman, Sri Ramakrishna said. So when he was at the waking state in his body and he meditated, he reversed the process. He went back and he saw the word deep inside him. And he said, when I saw the word, I saw everything was coming out of it and everything was going back into it, and no time was passing. That's an important point, you see. Down here, time is passing. So time and space have kicked in big time. It's all gross. Very slow passage of time. Like some of my students in prison tell me, very slow passage of time, you see, in my cell every day. You see. And space, matter, you see, bumping up against things all the time. Be careful how you move. So at that level of gross manifestation that's been formulated by the ignorance of the thinking mind, the collective thinking mind, then everyone's gotten into agreement that this world exists and it's real. And only the seers are coming forth and saying, how can you say that? You pass out of it tonight. Every 24 hours you pass out of it. How can it be real? The real does not change. The unreal never exists. The real never ceases to be. The truth about both of these have been realized by the seers. Who said that? Shri Krishna. In the Gita. The unreal never is, the real never ceases to be. So that's the Advaitic declaration of Krishna's time, thousands of years prior to Jesus saying it. So with all of these philosophical axioms from the qualified non-dual level put in place in the gaps in our thinking consciousness, Westerner can all of a sudden understand how profound Mother India is, and can move away from science, physics, can move away from the limitations of the intellectual frame of reference alone, can move away from philosophy as argumentation, and can move away from acts of selfishness, and begin to take on acts of selflessness, you see. Now I must work selflessly for the good of others, so that I can clear my mind of all these karmas that are coming from worldly life, and turn my mind inward, make my mind single. Thine eye be single, you shall know the truth. That's a practice that you keep up. So I said last week that I would accent that several times in the next 3 classes, that Advaita Vedanta is not a philosophy that's devoid of practice. It depends upon practice. In this world, especially. because it's the most enigmatic piece of information you'll ever hear and try and remember, then you need to practice remembering it. Don't forget to remember, as Sri Ram says in one of his songs to Hanuman. Don't forget to remember, my dear devotee. So I just chanted that, right? Remaining in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. What fact? That all is Brahman. And the revealed scriptures are telling you that all the time. So you have to go to the revealed scriptures and remind the mind. See? The memory is so important in this tradition. Smriti is the word in Sanskrit. We sing about it sometimes. We just say, Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Chaitaneti Abhidiyate Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Smriti Rupena Samstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha Ya Devi Namo Namaha Ya Devi Namo Namaha Ya Devi Namo Namaha Ya Devi Namo Namaha. And Om. Don't forget to end with Om. Begin with Om, end with Om. And peace, peace, peace. So Smriti Rupenaya means, O Divine Mother, you exist in the hearts and minds of all beings as memory. Memory. And of course, memory in a worldly sense is here. Come on over, have a cup of tea, and look at my picture book. I'll tell you everything I've done in my past life. And here's my children, and here's what I did, and here's my career, and so forth. I'm going to weep a little bit over that, reminisce. See? Oh, no, not that kind of memory. Smriti means thinking back upon your noble ancestors in your past lifetimes. All the way back to the sun god, if you have to. I can trace my lineage back to the sun god. There's a man in India who came up to me at Sri Ramakrishna's birthplace called Kamarpakur, nice village, you see. Said, I'm a descendant of Sri Ramakrishna. And I looked at him, he actually kind of looked like Sri Ramakrishna. He was a Brahmin priest at the temple there. So very beautiful to think nobly, see. My teacher used to say, here in America they're trying to make me think that if I want to see my relatives I have to go to the zoo. To the zoo. See, that's this linear time idea that you're bound in, see. And you didn't listen to Lord Buddha, who got up off of the linear view of time and saw everything as a layer cake. Everything happening all at once. Like your samadhi and the worlds and waking, dreaming, deep sleep, all happening at once. It's just in the eternal moment. There is nothing but the eternal moment, because there's nothing but the eternal Brahman. All else is false. Brahman is real, the world is unreal, from the ultimate standpoint. If you're not at the ultimate standpoint, then come to the penultimate standpoint with me, and we'll prove it to you, so your mind will become clear. You'll free yourself of Bhranti Darshana with Darshana. Bhranti means deluded thinking, and this means clear thinking. You think you can get to realization and samadhi without a clear mind, without a pure mind? Not going to happen. You can do hundreds and thousands of acts, Shankara says. You can get yourself into hundreds and thousands of asanas, body postures. You can have progeny for lifetimes. You can chant the names of the Lord until your throat gets hoarse. Nothing will get you samadhi until you clear the mind of its misconceptions. And here in the West today we have misconceptions and illusions masquerading as truth. You have to call them conventions. Even religion, you have to say, is just mundane human convention now. It's not doing its job. So this is why our founder here, Lexixen, who is also known as, in Japanese Zen, as Jikai, who is also known in Hinduism as Purushottama, who is also known in the Ramakrishna order as Ramakrishna Das Baal, who is also known in Sufism as Nur al-Jarahi, Sheikh Nur al-Jarahi. So many different religious traditions he looked into to find the same truth lying at the bottom, because the great master Sri Ramakrishna had done that in the 1800s. So, with that kind of courage of your conviction based on philosophical soundness, foundation, rock solid foundation. You can't build your house on sand. Built it on this rock of faith, but make sure faith is tested by wisdom. Swami Vivekananda said that basically, if love is okay, he says, its tendency is to start to descend into sentimentality. Wisdom, oh, that's pretty good too, but it can become sterile. See? So you need the two to test each other. Bhakti and Jnanam, the two wings of the bird. Then the bird can get off the ground. So why this big argument about action or inaction, or devotion or wisdom? See, merge them. That's called the four yogas. And when you merge those four, action, inaction, devotion, and wisdom, and Swami Vivekananda said that's the new religion of the age. If you want a good religion, let's try that. I mean, what we're talking about here is beyond religion. Lexixen called it the open space beyond religion, our founder. But if you want a real, true religion to get you there, then how about trying the four yogas? Manning yourself up with those, and because they'll cover all the parts of your being, your devotional side, your speculative side, your philosophical side, that is, your meditative side, and your active side, all covered there with a fourfold path. And then you synthesize them. Purna yoga, integral yoga, synthesis of yoga by Aurobindo. Everyone's talking about it, you see. Well, let's bring all the yogis together. But Vivekananda said, yes, here they are. And I've drawn them from way back in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna talked about them as Chaturdasya Yoga, the four yogas. Look at the end of your Gita and you'll find them there. One of them is called Buddhi Yoga, so it's a yoga of the intellect. So those are very powerful, and all of this will bespeak of non-dual philosophy as its underpinning. You see, I mean, basically it's that thread running through the tapestry, you see, or through the string of pearls, Sri Krishna says. You need that thread running through it. So that's hidden. And that's why I said enigmatic piece of information. You can hear it, it'll catch your attention depending on what guna your mind is in any given day. That is, if you're slothful or if you're restless, probably not going to catch your attention very well. But if you're balanced one day and you hear it, that makes sense. You see, you're interested all of a sudden. But then your mind, you go to sleep and you visit dreams, and you visit deep sleep, and you come back out to waking, and your mind forgot to be balanced again. It went into sleep balanced, came out unbalanced, you see. Why me? The mantra of the suffering, why me? But what's the mantra of the striving? See, this is my next class series. Next week after next, or 2 weekends from today, we'll have that suffering, striving, and samadhi series of classes. So the mantra of the suffering is, why me? Mantra of the striving is, who am I? And the mantra of the realized is, I am. So at the same time you're going, why me, you see, because your mind isn't under your control, because the gunas are fluctuating all the time, because the world is changing constantly, And you haven't developed the witness consciousness enough to draw back from it and detach from it, and to stay focused and on point. 100% concentrated, without wavering, without deviation. Practice that, and then you remain in it, you see. So practice is important in Advaita Vedanta. I completely disagree with people who are taking up the Advaita Vedanta brought here by Swami Vivekananda and telling you that you're already perfect. Somebody said that, Swami Vivekananda once, he said, "Perfect? We're all fools. That's what we are." Who else would take on a body this far away from Brahman, covered with Maya and the curtain of nations, where all these ills are going on, but fools? So to wake up is to return to your natural self. I'm talking to a physicist, actually, an astrophysicist the other day. "Oh, you mean to tell me," this person said, "that there's a self somewhere, and that all of these things are projections off of it?" I said, "Yes, that's getting close to it, you see. Your true self is everywhere and in everything, but you're dreaming yourself away from it, you see. So if you want to call it bodies, if you're so damn attached to the body, then if you want to call it bodies, you have this non-dual body, which is your Atman, or your Paramatman, or your Tathagata, or however you want to call it in whatever tradition. That's pure and perfect, ever awake, fully conscious. And then off of that are coming these emanations, you see, that the vibrations that move out from the center. So right now, if you were to wake up in the waking state, you would realize your Atman and identify with it, and this would all disappear, like it did for Sri Ramakrishna. And then you'd wait around for an hour or so, and he'd come back out of it, back to this body, and say, "Oh, Mother, where have you brought me now?" Didn't even recognize his own body, his own wife. He didn't recognize Swami, Naren, the young Vivekananda, for a long time, until his consciousness could come back into his senses and his body again. So he went inside to his true nature. There was no inhibitions, no blocks. You talk about it in terms of the 7 chakras, if you want. He would say, if Mother Kundalini awakens, she'll pierce the 7 chakras. The first 3 chakras are basically eating, drinking, and sex life, earth, lower heaven, and higher heaven. You pierce those, and you arrive at the heart, where all the devotees gather, see, where all the lovers of reality are. And then you pierce that chakra, and you go to the wisdom teachings. You pierce that chakra and go to the visionary center. And then you go to the 1,000-petaled lotus. That's where your Atman abides. See? Only Atman abides, they say in our tradition. So in my usual preamble to this second class, where we want to get into some of the teachings, practice is important, and that's where we left off here. In the middle here, you see these 4 points of Tibetan Buddhism, the Vajrayana path, that I heard from Jamgon Khantrul Rinpoche, because Karmapa, who initiated Lex and I into the path, on Maui, not too far away here, couldn't speak English. So you can see the 4 main precepts there. The first was Guru Yoga and empowerment. The second was practice. The third was process. And the fourth was perception. That's why I called this 4 Ps. See, which I like to gather up numbered systems and put English words that start with the same letter. I call it alliteration or something. So basically, it works. You see precepts, points, practice, and process. If you want to memorize those English-wise, then you can sort of outline for yourself what you need to do to be a dharmic practitioner in Buddhism. Of course, in Buddhism, the first thing you have to do is what? proclaim your fealty to the First Noble Truth. First Noble Truth is there is suffering. You cannot be a Buddhist if you don't admit that there is suffering, that the world is full of suffering. And because look at so many people enjoying. And look at so many people enjoying at the expense of others even. So they think pleasure and gain is the goal of life. But everything is interlaced with suffering. Pleasure is a kind of suffering. They're just not seeing how the two play with each other in cycles. Waking, dreaming, deep sleep cycles, or lifetime cycles, or monthly cycles. When they do, then they'll say, there is suffering. See? And like Holy Mother said to us, the suffering of this world has gotten into the very marrow of my bones. Because she felt so deeply for all her hundreds and thousands of children when she was alive, that had come to her. Sri Ramakrishna only had his circle, 16 apostles, direct disciples, and some lay disciples and so forth. So someone once said to Holy Mother, he had such great disciples and look what you got. She said, don't talk to me about his disciples, they were masters. Sri Ramakrishna took them to himself and he pushed all the small fry to me, she said. So she was dealing, Mother of the Universe, she was dealing with all these suffering souls that didn't really have the wherewithal to get themselves up and out of spiritual ignorance, the bed of their spiritual ignorance. This is morning. Lifetime is morning. It's time to get up out of bed and awaken from spiritual ignorance and get yourself free before night comes. Night is death. And it's continual cycles. Just like birth, life, and death is like day, mid-noon, and night, you see. And people are going through lifetimes without knowing it. And your breath is telling you that. In breath, held breath, out breath, in breath, held breath, out breath. A japa, it's called. You're saying the names of the Lord with every breath, but you don't know it. So you should come to know it. So with these 4 points here, or these 4 P's, we could say, we looked at them already. I don't want to go back because everyone that was here last week is here, and I hope the live streaming audience is staying faithful to the series. We looked at the Guru, Yoga, and Empowerment. We looked at the Vajrayana practice. We came to the 3 bodies. Basically, that's an inset box I put there because, right, the last point there in Vajrayana practice was gain realization of the Trikaya, the 3 bodies. Now, sometimes this is called triple gem. I was initiated into the mantra of the triple gem when I got Tara mantra. Ayu Punya Jnana Bhuktinkura Swaha in Tibet. See? So life, wisdom, and happiness, basically. So that's a sort of correlation with the 3 bodies, which is again a sort of correlation with the 3 worlds. You can see that in Tibetan Buddhism and in Vedanta. So you see there's the Dharmakaya, there's the Sambhogakaya, and there's the Nirmanyakaya. Nirmanakaya. So basically you have these 3 bodies of the Buddha. The first is Buddha nature, or Dharma, the Dharma body of the Buddha. This is the body of the teachings, they say. And there's so many of them, without end. You can take these teachings of the Dharma, and it's as if the Divine Mother, Pragyaparamita in this case, said, well, there's the world, and it's full of suffering, and it's got an infinite amount of waves of ignorance in it. So I think I'll offset that with an infinite amount of teachings of the Dharma. So they have no excuse but to wake up. What a fool would be if you just engaged yourself with the folly of the mind. That's one thing, speaking of Holy Mother, they ask her, what's the most amazing thing you ever saw? She said, though they make mistakes all the time and suffer from them, they never improve themselves. They just keep making those same mistakes. She saw this about the people. Now she's talking about Hindu people at the time, because that's what was her area. Was there in India. She never moved outside of it. That is physically. That here we are, sons and daughters of her, here in this far distant land. She used to say, I have many white people as my children, many Caucasians. I was just reading yesterday about Sister Vedanta and Sarah Bowl and all these beautiful Western women who went with Swami Vivekananda to India in the early part of this Ramakrishna movement, and how they were the forerunners there, the early women on the scene, amongst all these Hindu faces, and what the experiences they had. So to see that is to see another culture, and in terms of Dharmakaya, it would be this whole body of teachings that's there for you to open up to. It's not just secular wisdom, which probably is better to call just knowledge, secular knowledge, maths and arts and sciences and all that. That's called apara in India, lower. And you make your living with it and so forth and so on. It's got a place. But the Paravidya is unknown to us, Dharma. So we only became a moral culture, afraid of immorality. And this is where we came up with God and devil and redemption and sin and all these dualities that are plaguing us, that aren't true to the soul. God doesn't exist. Devil doesn't exist. There's only the great self. You can call that God if you want, but that's the sum total of all beings. That's consciousness, with a capital C. God doesn't have a form. So if you give God a form, you're risking treading on some of these non-dual realities, these rules, regulations. So God takes on form, you could say that, and for the benefit of the devotees, like Krishna says in the Gita. But you must go beyond form to get to these higher realizations, and the Dharma is the ladder that takes you there. It's not morality and immorality. It's say, thou shalt not kill in morality, but in Dharma you would say thou cannot kill, because who you're killing was never born. Their true nature is soul, Atman, not body. So the bodies can come and go as many times as they want, but the soul is remaining the same. So it's not possible to kill. If you do, though, there's karma to pay. There's recompense. Who sows must reap. See, that's definitely on the qualified non-dual level. So then, therefore, the seers and the illumined souls are very careful about their actions. They're very mindful in Buddhism, or very free of karma. You see, in Hinduism, they're mindful of karma, like the Jains, not killing anything or thinking violent thoughts or any of that. So the Dharmakaya there, you see, confers the knowledge that all thoughts and phenomena are devoid of any independent identity. The ego would be one of the first things you would call out to see through. My teacher used to say, that's why Christianity is so dualistic, because they think there's a God. But there's no God. That's the ego they're worshipping. They're all worshipping their own egos. They're not worshipping God. So here in this world of name and form and time and space and causation, it's the ego that rules everything. And the very rare person who deflates the ego is called an illumined soul, or a seer, or a realized soul, or a saint. Then them you'll see egolessness. For the worldly, they'll usher the ego right in the door and usher the God right out the back door as they do. It's the first thing they want is the personality. Oh, come, let's talk, worldly talk. Let's talk about everything but what's important. Let our lips just flap. See? and not say one thing of any merit or import. And so souls withdraw from that. You see, no, I don't think I like that. I think I'd rather hear the Dharma. See, or I'd just be silent. Maybe I'll just be silent for a while under a tree. So, ego is got this false sense of reality associated with it. But the knowledge that all thoughts and phenomena are devoid of any independent identity. We'd call that pratitya samudpada in the Madhyamaka path. This is Vajrayana, but there's also the Madhyamaka. And then there's the Hinayana path too. So 3 forms of Buddhism came forth out of India over time. And the Tibetans, later in the game, about 700 AD, with Marpa. Somebody said today, I'm reading the songs of Milarepa. See, so he was one of those earliest of all realized Tibetan souls who got their teachings from Indian yogis. Sambhogakaya, or enjoyment body, that's called the Buddha fields, confers the means by which the practitioner communicates with other practitioners in meditation. So, in our tradition, it would be called walking the skies. You might have seen that chart that I put together on walking the skies. So Lord Vashishta teaches that to Sri Ram as a young boy. Queen Chudala, she was a walker of the skies. She's trying to teach her husband how to walk the skies, but he didn't believe her that she was having these meditations where she could communicate with other souls. He said, you're just a woman, you can't do that. Only men can do that. So she was having these deep meditations, walking the skies and having communion with other souls. Just like people get together with bodies here and have children, you see. But there they get together with subtle bodies and have wisdom. You see, they share wisdom with one another. They penetrate each other. You see, in their minds, and the result of that is the offspring are called insights and realizations. So that's correlative from Vedanta to this teaching about the Buddha fields. So confer the means. So first it confers, the Buddha body confers the knowledge, and then it confers the means of which to do it, and then it confers the pure force of will. That's called the Nirmanakaya, or emanation body. That's the Buddha incarnations. We would have a sort of comparison with that with our avatars, but you probably wouldn't want to use the word avatar in Buddhism or in Islam, because they're prophets, but no avatars. So you have to be very careful philosophically of how you use your words. But in this case, Buddha emanations or Buddha fields. You see, it's connected, the Buddha fields and then the Buddha emanations and the wisdom that comes with it. So this confers the pure force of will, which helps you transcend karma, by which the yogi uses to benefit all sentient beings. So if you get the knowledge and get the means, then you can really help beings. So I just had one of our students call me or write me a couple nights ago, Saraswati. She said, Babaji, I'm here in Chicago, and there was a murder right outside my apartment. Person was shot to death. What do I do? He says, it really affected me. I know the teachings of Advaita Vedanta, the soul never is born, the soul never dies, but this has really shaken me. So what do I do? So I told her, yes, use your Advaita Vedanta now. It's the best time to call it to your mind is now, when you're being tested. And just meditate and hold that soul that just got shot with Holy Mother in your mind. It's not a prayer, because we don't really believe that prayer does any good. meditation is better. See? So you meditate because the soul isn't really dead, and it was never really born. And if it goes to heaven, it's a dream. So all of that has to be taken into consideration. You want the best for the soul. So why are you going to send the soul to heaven? That's not very high. How about sending it to the Almighty Father? How about freeing it from all its karma so that it won't have to be born again with the knowledge that I just got shot in my last lifetime. Therefore, I'm afraid of guns and loud noises or whatever, you see. And your parents won't know that. Why does he hate guns? So, all of these things, if you're able, by knowledge, means, and force of will, then you'll be able to help that soul. So I said, number one, do that. Number two, be very thankful that you're nonviolent and that you're compassionate and that you're on the path to enlightenment. I told her. Right outside the window of her apartment, bloody corpse lying there, shot, you see. And some other person had shot them. So be thankful that you're nonviolent, that you're compassionate, and that you're on the path to freedom, because if you get free, then you can really help beings. Not till you may become more of a problem than a solution if you try and help people before you're free. So you man yourself up, you enable yourself, you see, with this knowledge, and like the Tibetans did since 700 AD. They studied the life and death process. They saw that souls went to bardos after they die. They saw that there was a bardo between death and the next birth. And they learned how to guide souls with words. They learned to actually speak to the subtle body. The physical body's there dead, freshly dead. The women and children are weeping, and the Lama or the Rinpoche says, "Leave the room, please." Why, they say? Because he'll hear you crying. And they say, "But he's dead." He says, "No, he's not dead. His body's gone. His subtle body is floating inside. And if he hears you weeping, he'll get attracted back to earth. I'm trying to guide him to a better land, to a better body, see, toward the Buddha fields. So let me speak to him uninterrupted, without your weeping." So these beings think that he died, and he lived, and he was born, but the Rinpoche knows that's never the case. The soul's unborn, speaking in Vedantic language. So he'll speak to the subtle body of the soul. That's like your dream body I was just describing. And that's where you'll go when you die, unless you can achieve higher. If you've meditated during your life, this Tibetan teacher told me, Janggon Khantrul Rinpoche, he said, there's a chance to get free at the time of your death if you're guided. But it's much better to get free before you die. That's Jivan Mukta. That's way down here. See, develop the mental agility necessary to attain Mahamudra, to get free. So all of these things are in the knowledge, you see, of the Vajrayana path. That's what they've concentrated on for 1,300 or more years now, with many incarnations. You know, like Karmapa, Dalai Lama, they all had over a dozen incarnations already through that period. Like Krishna saying to Arjuna, I know all my past births, you don't know yours yet. So they know all their past births, and they know that they were the Atman in every one of them, not the personality. Personality came and went. That's why the ego is it's devoid of any independent identity. It arises with phenomena, and it ties with phenomena. It's conditioned by phenomena. Your ego, not yourself, your ego. It's living in the midst of phenomena all the time, so it comes to believe that phenomena is real. Sri Ramakrishna said, enough lives lived in worldliness convinces the soul that the world is real. Well, what's he saying there? He's saying that actually the world's not real at all. It's all just arising phenomena, and if the soul attaches to it, it gets conditioned by that. Oh, I was a man, I was a woman, I was a mother, I was a father, I was a grandfather, I was fat, I was thin, I was intelligent, I was stupid. You see, whatever phenomena came up around you, plus all of nature, I was a body made of 5 elements, I was a swimmer, I was a hang glider. Everything that came up as phenomena from the mind, which we will see here soon, everything coming from the mind itself as projection, is not the self. And the ego gets conditioned by it, and it thinks it has an independent identity. It thinks that it's the self. But that's a curtain of Maya pulled down over its eyes. That's the wool you hear talked about. So you can see why the 3 bodies of the Buddha are important here to this tradition. After you've gained all of these other things in practice and precept, then you get to that point where you gain realization of the Trikaya, the 3 bodies. That's how they describe it in the tradition. And as we're doing Tibetan Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta kind of side by side in our limited time we have to give it, we can make some correlations to the 3 bodies and the 3 worlds. This is all India, basically. It doesn't matter whether you're talking ancient Vedas or Buddhism or Jainism before that, or Vedanta more current, or yoga. It's all based on that 3 bodies and the 5 sets of 5s that accompany them. 5 elements, 5 senses, 5-fold mind. So going on to point 3. We finished point 2 then. Remember, that was the practice. Hopefully you can do it shamatha, dwelling in peace. See, you can do it all dwelling in peace. All phenomena arises, you remain peaceful. You keep your center all your life. Live in peace, be born in peace, live in peace, and pass away in peace. The third here is the process. That's how you gain quiescence and insight. Point A, accrue merit via offerings and prayers so as to clear subtle karmas. Well, for instance, I remember practicing in Buddhist phase, doing 1,000 prostrations every morning. So I'd get up with some of the students, and we'd stand in the floor there of the temple and just prostrate 1,000 times. Up and down, up and down, up and down. Every morning we did that. And that was part of the practice. So your prostrations, your offerings, various things. Now sometimes you see films now on the internet and so forth where some Buddhist monk walked around the whole world prostrating every few steps. You see, up the mountains prostrating, down the mountains prostrating, across the deserts prostrating. Every few steps he took, he did a prostration, you see. A great austerity and a great practice. So that's just an example of some of these austerities you might undertake, or some of these offerings you might make. Of course, if you did it all mindlessly, it wouldn't really amount to a hill of beans. So the idea is having your consciousness intact, or if it's not in contact, it's not intact, making it intact. It's your mind, and it's your consciousness. Why shouldn't it be under your control? And if the ego is not you, why should you sacrifice it to the ego? Because then you're going to fall into the first noble truth problem. There is suffering. Point B, meditation on the 1,000-syllable Vajrasattva mantra. Shall we teach you that right now? It'll take us probably all day. It's a long mantra that they will recite. So let's just say that the practice includes mantra. And so you'll have beautiful mantra in Tibetan, like Om Tari Tut Tari Turi Swaha, Ayu Punyagana Puktin Kuru Swaha. So you're talking to the green and white Tara. Your mantra is to the great mother of the Buddhas, as our founder Lexicon called her. Or what we saw up here, Vajravahini, I think she was mentioned up here. Worship Vajravahini, who is the embodiment of wisdom, and see all women as her. We had that last week. So meditate on the mantra, then constantly strive for deeper insight. It seems like a simple statement. It's so easy to do your practice by rote and not deepen it. Our founder, Lexicon, again mentioning him several times today on Father's Day, he used to say that too. He said, you have to breathe life into your spiritual practice every day, so that it just doesn't become by rote. Like maybe you see the priests, the Brahmin priests, or the clergy and so forth, the priest craft. They might have even fallen into the idea that they don't need to practice anymore because they're now holy men or something. But Shankara, I told you last week, why do you still offer flowers to your Guru Sliplers? Why do you still meditate? Why do you still do? He said, because I want my vision of Brahman to be pure. And if I don't keep my mind wiped, the mirror of my mind wiped clean, I might have a distortion as to how I see Brahman. So I don't want that. So even the Advaitas, this is after they've attained realization, will keep up their practice. That's for the good of others, of course, in their case. But it's also that they want to keep, they know that the mind can accumulate dust. Karmic dust, philosophical dust, cosmic dust, philosophical dust. So they want to keep that clean and clear. The mind, Holy Mother used to say, the mind is very important at this stage because it's through the mind that you'll get to Brahman. Why don't the animals get to Brahman? Because they don't have a mind. So it's through the mind of a human being, because it projected all this, that it can get free of all this. It can see its projection and dissolve it. You don't want to wait for Shiva to come at the end of an age and do that for you. Or Pompeii to come showering down all around you with all its lava. You want to dissolve everything now. That's why I chanted at the beginning of the class. How does the yogi with an illumined mind allow mind, the thoughts to arise in the mind? He lets them arise spontaneously, then he dissolves them all back into the mind like bubbles into water. Buddhist cha, yata jale, Buddhist, even sounds like bubbles. Jale, water. See? So you have to make a conscious effort at the end of every night to dissolve everything that you thought back into your mind, so that it won't have a residue the next day. It's clear as I can put it. If somebody insulted you, you dissolve it that night. If somebody praised you, you dissolve it that night. This is the practice of an Advaita Vedantist. It's called Advaita Vedanta Sadhana. Showed that first issue of Nectar years ago to the Swamis in India. And they were gathered around me and I was saying, here's the new magazine from America on Vedanta. And they all said, ooh, Advaita Vedanta Sadhana, we like that phrase. We like that phrase. So they knew that there were pretenders who were pretending to have non-dual realization, and they knew who the authentic beings were too, because they were in an order founded by one. So they wanted to make sure that this idea of practice makes perfect is there at the beginning, is there in the middle, it's there at your realization, and it's there after you got realized. There is a form of practice that persists for the non-dualists. So constantly strive for deeper insight. If you want to put it in Sri Ramakrishna's words, You remember I just said, no matter how high a bird flies, it also has to come to rest on a branch once in a while. That was his metaphor for non-dual meditation. You have to come back to the body, the branch, in order for the body to continue to live, because it'll die if you leave it uninhabited by consciousness for too long. This body's going to go, oh, I guess that's it. I give up. Well, he also had other stories of the bird. It's like, no matter how high a bird can fly, it can always fly higher. So that's his story about this, deeper insight. And he would preface that by saying, don't call me a master, please. Now that he's passed away, all of us can call him the great master. He can't say anything. So we will do that, because he is. But he said, don't call me a master. That word pricks my flesh, because it assumes that I've reached the end of my spiritual experience. There is no end to spiritual experience. Is there any end to worldly experience? Is there any end to misery and suffering? Is there any end to the rounds of birth and death and samsara? Is there any end to the Dharma? Is there any end to space, nature? It's all infinite. And the finite has come out of the infinite. But since it's come out of the infinite, it too is finite. I mean, it too is infinite. It's all infinite, you see. Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnat. It's a famous peace chant. So if that's true, then the spiritual experience also must be infinite. So he wanted it left that way. So in order to have that infinite experience, you're going to have to constantly strive for deeper insight. You have to spend your time doing that. All right, well, I've got so much, to quote the Buddha, I've got so many drops in my Dharma bucket. See, I went around, collecting drops of Dharma. So I went here and there and saw that teacher. I went to that teacher. Or I read that wisdom scripture. I heard that person speak. I practiced my meditation. So I've got so many drops in my Dharma bucket now. So how can I fill it? See, it's going to be the credo of the sincere aspirant. See, you're always looking for other jobs and more money. Should that end? Well, then, shouldn't this also keep going? You're also looking for more insight, more depth, more understanding. Because you're storing up your riches in heaven, Jesus said, if you do that. Not on earth. So, I wanted to give you a rundown of those 3 points of that third. That third axiom. The fourth one here is direct perception of voidness. But before that, you see the little inset box. Mental process of attaining quiescence. Overcome mental sluggishness. Calm all mental tendencies. Gain detachment from names and forms. Develop analytical insight. And attain transcendent wisdom. I could stop and comment on each one of those. Probably the one that I would stop on would be the first one. This overcome mental sluggishness. That's tamas, basically. And it's fed by rajas. Tamas is slothfulness. Restlessness feeds it. Because you get tamasic because you ran your wheels too much, which is why I was talking about deep sleep, how it so beautifully, marvelously refreshes you just after 45 minutes being in it. But dreaming, can run you ragged. You wake up having slept 8 hours, but you dreamed 5 or 6 of them. And so the mind, therefore, is waking up with their memory of all that dreaming. So you'll wake up restless. And samanic samadhi isn't going to help. See? Neither will no-dose samadhi, though that would be better. Samanic samadhi means I take a pill to have a good deep sleep state, you see. That's induced by an external medicine. You have to command your consciousness yourself so that it's free of all pretenders. And you do have that courage of your conviction. I did it. with consciousness, by consciousness, for consciousness. And therefore you won't have any doubts and fears rising up. So overcome mental sluggishness. Calm the mental tendencies means, of course, just in meditation they tell you, cut time down, cut thought down, cut time down in your meditation. There's a song about that. Gain detachment from names and forms. It shows you how these early obstacles persist later, don't they? I mean, you can have practiced for 20, 30, 40 years. They're still telling you at the fourth axiom here to detach from names and forms. So that's how important it is to master any given element of your spiritual practice. This is back here why you constantly strive for deeper insight, because as you strive for deeper insight, your mind goes towards God. As you stop striving for deeper insight, your mind drifts back to the world. It's not rocket science. So you keep your mind on God. That's all. Keep your mind on the Dharma. If you can't think about God all the time, which most people can't, think about the Dharma. Engage your mind in reading philosophical treatises and scriptures, non-dual scriptures and so forth. That's how the seers showed you how to do it. Otherwise, names and forms, even subtle ones in dream, can come drifting in. Develop analytical insight and attain transcendent wisdom. So beautiful. Let's finish this chart for the break. Number 4 here, direct perception of voidness. So here is where non-duality becomes the name of the game. And we'll look at the Sparsha Yoga after the break. Gaudapada has his own unique way of telling us about this as a practice, as a mental practice. True, when I say practice persists for the Advaita Vedantists and the Mahamudra masters and so forth, it's mostly in the mind that's going on, not so much outside that has to go on. Mind, everything has come from mind, so you go to the root of the mind to quell everything that's arising. See? That's why I just chanted again, bubbles rise, you see. What does the yogi do with his mind? All the things that come up every day. He dissolves them back into water that night. So there's nothing left. All bubbles into water. It's just all one clear body of indivisible, homogeneous awareness at the end of every time. So if he has to work with the mind, he or she, they do it that way. They make sure that they dissolve all the tendencies back, which we just talked about there in that inset box. So then you can get to direct perception of voidness. Refine mental readiness via analysis and formless concentration. Up to this point, they've talked to you about Vajravahini. See, you make connection with her, and you have a mantra. A mantra. Whenever there's a mantra, there's a form, a deity that you have in accord with the mantra. So you're concentrating on a great soul in your mind with that great soul's name and probably the word Om in front of it. And therefore you've been practicing upasana. You've been practicing meditation with form, vipassana and upasana, those kinds of things. But when it comes to formlessness, that's a whole new area for most souls. See, so you have to prepare your mind for that. That's why they wanted you to analyze form. And it could be such a deep analyzation as to say, if you see the Buddha on the road, kill him. You see, that was a famous phrase back in the 80s, you see. And of course it's tongue-in-cheek saying, but basically you don't want to have a form in the way. Not even Buddha, and Buddha himself would tell you that. You get to the Father through the Son. Come unto me, I will give you the teachings, and then you must pass beyond me. And you can be with me at the right-hand side of of my Father's throne in heaven. Those kinds of sayings, cryptic as they are, also point towards an idea of formlessness, the oneness of the Father and the Son, and the perfection of the devotee, perfect in their true nature. So formless concentration is called for. Then dissolve ordinary concepts and perceptions by perceiving their voidness. And we're heading toward this last word of the chart, Mahamudra. I feel like putting off a lot of the explanation for it until we actually see the chart on Mahamudra. As you'll see, this makes a lot more sense once you see it. But of course, ordinary concepts, that would be in both yoga and Buddhism, conceptualization. It's a habit of the mind, especially the intellectual mind, is to think in terms of concepts. Some people haven't even gotten there. They're still very rudimentary in their thinking process. Pretty much just day-to-day life with objects and pleasures and food is enough for them. And so it's only that's why they wanted you to develop analytic consciousness, concentration, so you can analyze. That's neti in Vedanta, and shunyata in Buddhism. All these practices that are there are meant to turn your mind into an appointed instrument that can pierce through appearances. Name and form are some of those appearances. And if you get attached to them, they will need piercing too. So dissolve ordinary concepts and perceptions by perceiving their voidness. There's a chart I almost brought, but I've showed it several times in the last month, called the meaning of objects. The two rules around meaning of objects is one, they're empty, and two, they can't fulfill you. So, and three, actually, they come from your mind, not from nature. Nature itself came from the mind. So you're using nature in the mind to create thoughts and concepts that will produce forms, basically is it in a nutshell. Where other people are thinking, God created the world, or it just happened by accident from a big bang or something. But you're thinking with the mind-only schools, basically, is that all of this was brought about in the collective mind and fashioned the worlds, got into the worlds as consciousness, took on bodies, played for a while, gave them up. Other people can call that birth, life, and death, but you're calling it projection, sustenance, and withdrawal on top of a soul that never changes. One great soul, the self, Param Atman. And so all the conceptualization and mentation is going on, as far as Advaita Vedanta is concerned, in the mind. And so for Buddhism, it wants you to get back to if you will, one last concept. It's maybe the last concept you're going to be left with, is this idea of having to dissolve all concepts, based on the fact that they're empty. So you have to reason with yourself. They're empty of the ability to fulfill me, so I should give up my attachment to them. They're empty of substance, because even science just proved that to me. They're just vibrating particles changing at a billionth of a second. So what's holding them together? You build your house on sand, Jesus said. You're building your house on atomic particles. And that's why Buddha said, I won't build any more houses. Not stone, not wood, not flesh and bone, and not wise conception. Because he's going from outward in. First there's the stone, then there's the wood, that's nature, and the 5 elements. And then there's your body, and then take a big jump here, there's your mind. And that's wise conception. That started the whole process off. All other bodies were produced by the mind. So your parents did not produce your bodies. You did. And the mind produced all bodies, even the bodies of your parents. And so this is what the Tibetan Buddhists concentrated on to come up with their idea of Bardo's, and what happens after death to the soul, and how it comes back, how it chooses its parents, how it chooses its country. And there's no God there in Buddhism operating. Buddha himself was accused of not believing in God. I mean, he said, did I say there was no God? So he obviously did not believe in God. But as a philosophy, they're staying very far away from that, just like Islam does and just like Judaism does. They're staying very far away from calling God a form, or bringing God into these comfort zones, or bringing God into the world of suffering. Saw a joke the other day where some fisherman is yanking a fish, out of the lake, out of the stream, or he's fly fishing, you see, and there's this backpacker standing next to him saying something actually just ask him a question. And so, did you get that joke? So basically the fisherman is saying, with the caption under the joke is, I don't keep anything I catch. I just run a hook into their mouth, yank them out of the water gasping, and then remove the hook and throw them back in, leaving them wondering what kind of a God would do that to them. See? So that's what a lot of people think. What kind of a God would make war, and what kind of a God would cause crack babies, and what kind of a God would cause lava to flow and ruin the lives and homes of 150 people nearby us. So basically, no God would do that. No God we'd want to worship, for sure. So God's obviously not in the quotient. It's the mind of collective humanity that's doing all this. The great mind, if you wish. But the great mind has three divisions: cosmic, collective, and individual. So now you are responsible for your individual mind. You're going to have to connect it to the collective and then get to the cosmic. The cosmic will be where you see the greatest form of all. Get to the Father through the Son. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. See? Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva Maheshwara. We sing it all the time. That's the cosmic mind. But if you go to Lord Brahma and tell him, I've seen all your worlds, they're marvelous, but I'm clean, I want to get out of the bath. So Lord Brahma will step aside and usher you into Brahman. You'll get to the Father through the Son. But that's a very determined soul that wants to leave the realm of name and form. Most people cling to it, and fear of death is a result. I mentioned that earlier. The fifth and lowest hell is fear of death. How can the deathless, birthless Atman ever fear death? The seer thinks, how is that possible? That people have fallen into such a hell as that. And it's a hell not created by a devil. And it's a heaven, not advised by God that they go to. It's the mind. So mind-only schools come forth again to try and clarify this for so many different religions and so many different cultures through the ages. India has always been there, keeping its non-dual foundation behind it, using the Dharma to explain it to the mind that has become benighted or ignorant. That's why we love Mother India and the Mother herself. So that was B, but C is realize the voidness in all stages of life. It may be difficult for most people, but they're probably going to want to realize voidness by the time their children move away. It's going to be easier too. They may feel like, oh, my life is over, my children are gone, and now what? See, well, now it's just getting good. See, now you don't have these distractions, you don't have these problems. Now you can practice voidness of mind and see what's there, see how blissful emptiness is. In the Mahamudra, which we'll take soon, Mahamudra there somewhere. Oh, I think I put these up in the wrong side, but it doesn't matter. In the Mahamudra, they say basically that Everything comes up from the mind spontaneously. It's empty, but it's also radiant. Maha Mudra means great seal. So every object, every person, every soul, everything has a stamp on it. Maha, the great mudra, seal. It means that it's all empty, but it's luminous at the same time. The emptiness is what you're trying to realize here, so that you don't get attached to any form ever again. You don't fall into birth and death again, or belief in the world being real and so forth. But at the same time that you're realizing the emptiness of all things, which would be rather Buddhism being proved to be pessimistic, as they say, you're called upon to realize the innate radiance, the emanation of luminosity that's coming up from those very same things. That the consciousness is in everything, like sweetness is in sugarcane juice. So when the great souls come out of meditation, they'll look at this world and see it as just an emanation of Brahman. But if the soul comes out of his meditation and he's not realized yet, then he'll just see this as more objects and more worlds and more problems. He's not seeing through to the voidness and emptiness of it yet. So it's a stage. It says here, realize voidness in all stages. And finally, develop the mental agility necessary to attain Mahamudra. So it's a good segue for our second half. So let's take all of this and develop some analytical insight about it during the break and through all stages of our life. Thank you for your kind attentions. We are back to the second half of the second class of non-duality in Tibetan Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta, and we coursed through the last half of this class, this chart rather, and we came to this fourth point, direct perception of voidness, and the mood shifted right away when we hit this. I could feel it in the room, and people also, eyebrows were raising a little bit quizzical, so anytime you depart from the realm of name and form, even though we know name and form are two elements of the fivefold Maya, it causes some consternation, I think, with people. And I don't think it's probably that much different with fully illumined souls who have to give up their forms. There's always some trepidation. I know it's been mentioned in like Vivekachudamani, Shankara and so forth, is that when the hailstone falls toward the ocean, it's a wonderful thing to see your mass of pure conscious awareness that is your true nature, but then you're still the hailstone and you're falling toward this mass of your own essence. You're solidified and you have to give up that solidification. In Tibetan Buddhism, that's why at the time of death they'll counsel you to let go of earth and then water and then fire and then air and then ether, because as you die, you have these different conditions come over your mind that have to do with the five elements. Like if your eyes burn, and fire is a problem, and if your mouth is dry when you're dying, water is a problem. You're attached to the five elements, so they're telling you to try and they're actually coaching you. Say, give up water now, give up water, renounce it, renounce it. So they're trying to talk you out of the body made of five elements, the gross body. So that's a coaching that's going on to the soul who's trying to release from this prison house of bones and flesh. Sri Ramakrishna called the body prison house of bones and flesh. So if you can do that ahead of time and meditate and leave your body alone, just like you do in deep sleep, then you're a more facile meditator. You can just, you might have to do some practice at the beginning. I'm not the body, I'm not the prana, I'm not the five senses, I'm not the mind, I'm not the intellect, I'm not the ego. I'm not. Neti neti it's called. But then eventually you'll reach a sort of level, but voidness seems more natural to you. Last week I was talking about how the mules going up the volcano have to rest even after 10,000 feet. 11,000 feet they rest again, 12,000 again. As you acclimatize your lungs to that rarefied atmosphere. Well, as a metaphor and a correlation with spiritual life, it's much the same way. It's that formlessness, voidness, emptiness, shunyata, however you want to call it, causes some considerations for the soul, because letting go of form is going to be the first problem, and then actually encountering formlessness is going to be the second, and dissolving into it. In fact, the 4 kinds of meditation on form is another chart I can bring maybe next week to show you how consciousness enters into itself to dissolve forms, and then it begins to merge, and then when it merges it begins to dissolve. And these are all stages that they've described of the ego. It's basically the ego giving up its hold on everything. And so the Buddhism will put it in terms of that. There's merging and absorption and so forth. Finally, homogeneity, just complete oneness, or not two-ness, you might say. So that was something that we reached at the very end here, and it ushered it into develop the mental agility necessary to attain the Mahamudra, the Great Seal. It'd be nice to go straight to Mahamudra right there, but we need to give Advaita Vedanta its voice in this class too. We've been spending a lot of time on Tibetan Buddhism last week and this week. So although we did start out last week, if you remember, with the 5 essential facts of non-duality, which is basically more of an Advaitic teaching. So let's look at Sparsha Yoga. Gaudapada, definitely India's father of non-duality. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. And of course his great students, Govindapada and finally Shankara, made it more possible for people to understand it. And there was a long time since Shankara to Vivekananda, because Shankara never took it out of India. He took it to the 4 pilgrimage places of India and established it everywhere, and also established temples that had been raised by the Buddhists. And so he did both the justice to dualism and also to non-dualism. But of course non-dualism was his essential thing. So nobody took it out of India until Vivekananda. So that was from 700 all the way up to 1893. You can see how long it was that non-duality was pretty much in its concentrated form caught inside of the subcontinent of India all that time. And of course there are versions of non-duality in Judaism, and aspects, elements of it in Islam, as a teaching, as its own philosophy, or maybe even as what's beyond philosophy, the open space beyond religion and philosophy. That's what India has been concentrating on all along, just like Tibetan Buddhism was concentrating on the phases or bardos of the soul, how it goes through life and then graduates into the Buddha fields, if you will, and uses knowledge to assign itself to different bardos and to come back into the body as a bodhisattva. All these things were what Tibetan Buddhism was developing, an ideology that just as the living liberated soul had been in India all that time, now Tibet had to develop in terms of its bodhisattva and the 10 pure lands of the bodhisattva, and all these beautiful teachings that came out as they concentrated on it. So then it's interesting, because about the same time Gaudapada was living, probably a little earlier, maybe 500, 600 AD, because Shankara was supposed to be maybe 700 or so. So Shankara's guru's guru was Gaudapada, and Govindapada in the middle of the two was the incarnation of the father of yoga from 140 AD. So you see how yoga and Vedanta was coming together in a big way, so that you could get these teachings of yoga, which just means union with reality, but also have it commented on by great beings like Shankara and Vedavyas, the fathers of yoga and Vedanta. So it's a beautiful thing. If you study it even historically, it's wonderful. But to see it with the eye of how non-duality is beginning to emerge out of the soil of India and move all the way up to the present time, when Vivekananda brought it to us at the Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893, is even more marvelous. So here you have a Sparsha Yoga, the non-touch yoga, really kind of one of, in Gaudapada's Karika, which is on the Mandukya Upanishad, which is only 12 slokas long, the scripture, one of the 108 Upanishads. He took that 12 slokas and he did his commentary on non-duality based on those 12 slokas. It was marvelous. It was unique. But what happened as a result of it was a commentary on non-duality that Western and Eastern philosophers alike have never found the like of. They all laud it to the skies. Even if they don't accept it, they laud it. It's just the way it was put. And of course some of that is all based in the word Om. AUM equals waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. And then the Shvara, there in the Om sign, is the fourth state, Turiya, which is this samadhi that they talk about. So all of that is a kind of quick history. Gaudapada was there about to do all of this. The interesting thing about both Shankara and Gaudapada was that they were Samayachara Tantrasists too. They loved Shiva. They were Shaivites, so there's God with form. They wrote hymns to Divine Mother and commented on one of the Gaudapada did a commentary on one of the Tantras even. So there's Divine Mother. So you've got Divine Mother, and you've got Shiva, and then you've got Advaita Vedanta. So this is a movement in India, or a darshana of its own, a sampradaya that was just full of richness, philosophically speaking, also with these elements of deep devotion to Father and Mother God. So form and formlessness was there in spades, you might say. So Gaudapada's Karika, in it is mentioned Asparsha Yoga, means non-touch. You can't touch. You cannot touch Brahman. It's a little bit like John saying, 500 or 600 years earlier, no man has seen God with these eyes. So there was some understanding there that God wasn't of the world or in the world, even in Jesus' time. Funny, because God got brought down so smack dab in the middle of matter through Christianity as it marched on. But back in the time, if no man had seen God with these eyes, then we must understand that when you're talking about God, it's a transcendental verity. And it's not in form, it doesn't have a name, and it's not subject to time and space, and it definitely doesn't suffer cause and effect like all other beings in the worlds do. Cause and effect is there in all the worlds, heavens, earths, and hells. So if there was that kind of understanding about the Almighty Father or the Spirit, then, and you could see how in India it had known that for thousands of years. Jesus was just bringing it back into a sort of deteriorated Judaism of the time. So if that was there, and you can see how Gaudapada would seize upon this teaching of the Word, which Jesus had also mentioned to John, and bring out these hidden facets of it and base it in non-duality. So he says here, I salute the best of beings, who with incomparable jnanam has realized that all beings are unborn and infinite, like the sky. I salute him on bended knee, he who teaches the non-touch yoga for the benefit of all beings, free of compromise, superior and unopposed. So you can see how deeply he feels about that. Other beings also felt that deeply, evidently. The Avadut sings that, for instance. Shuddham vishuddham avicharam anantam rupam nirlepa lepam avicharam anantam rupam nishkanda kandam avicharam ananta rupam Jnanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham Jnanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham. He sings, knowing the Supreme Brahman, one dares not place it in the context of divided or undivided, of pure or polluted, of having form or being formless. Effulgent like the sun, it is infinite and beyond even the intellect. I am that Brahman, pure conscious existence, wisdom and bliss, as boundless as the sky and infinite like space. Jnanamritam samarasam gaganopamaham. The end of every of these 40 verses is Chalisa he has here. Yavadut repeats that over and over again. I am pure wisdom, existence, and bliss, boundless as the sky, infinite like space. So you see that these great souls concur from age to age on the nature of Brahman. And the word that Gaudapada would use, his favorite word, would be ajati. It's unoriginated. Non-origination then became India's main watchword for non-duality, that most even Western philosophers, if you mention it to them, they'll say, oh yeah, that's Gaudapada. Non-origination means it never had a beginning, middle, and end. And Krishna taught that back in the Gita, too. He's told that to Arjuna on the battlefield. I have no beginning, middle, and end, Arjuna. Everything is unoriginated. So, you could say, my teacher used to say something like that, to say, basically, science believes that matter is destructible. Others believe matter is indestructible, but it's neither. It's non-originated. So you can't destroy matter, neither is it indestructible, because it apparently gets destroyed. It just changes form and energy and so forth. But the real truth is you stand back and say it's all unoriginated. And what to speak of forms, everything is unoriginated. It has no beginning, it has no middle, it has no end. So you're describing the nature of Brahman, but you're also lending Brahman to everything when you come upon a word like Ajativada, the path of those who know that there is no birth and there is no death. Very ennobling and very noble for the soul. So he brings us up in terms of asparsha yoga, non-touch. So here's the requisites for non-touch yoga. Keep in mind what some of the practices here in the Mahamudra were like, in Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana. The practice of non-duality is a nice term there. Again, it's that idea that it needs to be practiced, but at least mentally and intellectually it needs to be practiced, because it can escape you so easily. So freedom from fear would be first. And they say about, at least in India, they say the last two things to die are doubt and fear. Those die hard. You can even have had very high samadhis, but you can still have doubt and fear in your mind. So those things are very late. They go away very late in the game. So if you have them and you think you've been studying for 30, 40, 50, or 60 years, don't worry about it. Even the seers will give it to you that doubt and fear is just kind of a properties of the mind. And Sri Ramakrishna had a nice teaching about those things, including anger and lust. He said they were like burnt strings, or burnt ropes, he would say, that, it looks like a rope, but it can't bind you anymore. So he's talking about things in your mind that haunt you, that you're long over, but you still hold a memory of. And some people, if they were, say, too guided by morality and immorality, but virtue and vice, then they may feel guilty about still thinking those things. But the more illumined soul knows that those are just burnt ropes. They're just the mind, they're echoes in the mind. They don't have, a burnt rope can't bind you, Sri Ramakrishna used to say. So they're just recurring thoughts of the mind, and the more you think about the divine, the more those will go away, until finally a puff of wind will blow a burnt rope into fibers, into dust. So freedom from fear is first. Self-control and perseverance. This almost sounds like early yoga. So you can see how the yamas and niyamas of yoga, they don't go away. They just broaden and deepen. So your ahimsa may be a vow of, I'm not going to kill anyone anymore. But there Arjuna is on the battlefield and Krishna is saying, go kill your enemies. So that's a different kind of non-violence, you see. It's a different level of non-violence that he's now holding, that he has to understand. Say, based on a Jativada maybe, you can't kill anyone, because he was never born. The soul is indestructible. Akshara Brahman. Brahman is indestructible, so is the soul. So now my non-violence that started out as a vow based in sort of ultra-sensitivity to bodies and to conditions and to mores, now changes, and I see that there's no karma to a person who kills without anger. So it's all in the quality of the consciousness. this is the kind of teachings you can't give to people who aren't in some sort of understanding of the truth of non-duality. Nevertheless, they can't be disproved either. So self-control and perseverance, these kinds of things seem like beginning practices, but they mount and mature. So that maybe self-control before could be, I can keep myself from overeating, or from smoking or something. So that was a little kind of self-control you practice with the mind. But now now my self-control is I can keep myself from being fearful of having formless samadhi. You see, it's the same self-control, but it's huge now. It's developed, but you still have to practice it, because freedom from fear is enjoined upon you in order to have that experience. Like with being without air, see, a fear comes. So, you're going to have to practice not fearing that and just say, okay, I'm without air, but my Atman doesn't have lungs. It doesn't gasp out for breath. And it's pure consciousness. I may go unconscious if my body may go unconscious, but my Atman is never unconscious. So that's the practice I'm talking about. It's a practice done mentally to alleviate yourself of doubts and fears, because doubts and fears out there are obvious. Oh, there's a bear, or here comes a tiger, or whatever, here comes my ex-wife or something. So they're out there, but the stuff that's inside of you, that's different. See, those are things out of which those came. From this infinite store of seeds came these outer seeds, and so if I do away with them here, they will quit haunting me out there. So it's all mental practice. So moderate desire and enjoyment. Same thing can be said about that. You say, well, Sparsha yoga just sounds like yoga to me. It sounds like beginner's path. Awaken mind and have samadhi. Well, there's a quick jump. So obviously he must be talking about subtle desires and subtle enjoyments. Like, for instance, let's take just gross enjoyments. Like I said, some people don't have the wherewithal to go without 3 meals a day, or so if they don't get their food, they get angry. Or so some other people might say, well, I don't really need to eat, that's okay. I'll go without a meal, it'll be good for me. So there are different levels of wherewithal and quality. But other people's enjoyment is very subtle. So like maybe, like there's a practice where you take one morsel of food one day, and the next day, or I think it's actually opposite, you take, like, say, 15 morsels of food, and then the next day you take 14, and the next day you take 13, 12, 11, 10. So by the middle of the month, half moon comes, and you're down to one morsel of food. Then, as the month increases again, you add 1, then 2, the second day, or 17th day, and 3, and 4. So then you build it up like that. So it's a way of just relieving yourself or purifying yourself of the desire for food. I must eat. I must have this. I must have 3 meals a day. I can't live without it. But you prove to yourself opposite. And in fact, by the time you're eating 2 or 3 morsels of food a day, you feel much better than when your stomach was full all the time. And you're getting much more accomplished. Your energy's better. Your senses are seeing better and hearing better and so forth. So food had become a weight on you. So I mean, just as an example of enjoyment, the whole thing shifts in level of quality. What was an enjoyment before now becomes a much greater attainment around your enjoyments. Bliss is the same way. Patanjali says, first, Father of Yoga says, first obstacle is sleepiness. He's talking about meditation. Second obstacle is restlessness. Third obstacle is attachment and aversion. in your meditations. You're attached to your verse, you're attached to your verse. And the fourth obstacle is, surprisingly enough, bliss. You have to get over attachment to bliss to get to non-dual samadhi. So there's an enjoyment. Some people have subtle bliss, and they're holding on to it. You can call it sattva too, or you could call, Rajas and Tamas and Rajas rather, the first three of those obstacles. But the fourth one actually is more aligned with sattva, with subtle bliss. So now you're living very sattvically. You've attained a balance, but you're using your balance to enjoy things, not the way worldly people would enjoy things, but you begin to gravitate towards that kind of healthy lifestyle where you can just stay in enjoyment of objects all the time. And it's becoming kind of a bondage, where before you were supposed to gain for deeper insight, and now you can't gain deeper insight because you've got subtle bliss as your problem. Oh, everything's fine, I'm all right, you're all right. I think I'll just stay where I am because I don't want anything bad to happen to me. That's a fear. See? So if you're seeking absolute freedom from things, then you're going to have to understand that. Zen has it really well. This is Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind is a beautiful book. If you've read that back in the 60s and so forth. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Basically it's that the idea in Zen is that you never make any progress. You're never a master. You're the same beginner today as you were back when you started the path. You're still a beginner. Sort of like Sri Ramakrishna saying, don't call me a master. Because if the ego gets a hold of any of this information, seriously, it ruins everything for you. If not for days, maybe for years or the rest of your lifetime. So you don't want the ego to even get a whiff of that kind of information in your mind. So you don't want to let your mind let on to the ego that it's thinking that way. So it might begin to believe itself again and spoil your spiritual path and your growth. It's happened to many people. So I'm just saying, as they say, these things may sound like they don't belong in a non-touch yoga, but these are the very things that belong there. Along with awakened mind and have samadhi. It seems like if these subtle things are gone, then you can actually awaken the mind. And if they're not, it's going to be very hard for you to get the mind awake. It falls asleep, falls out of concentration, not only in class but in meditation too. So you have to train it, to be ever awake. If thine eye be single, God never sleeps, so why should I? See? Third eye is always open. The two eyes may shut. And that's okay. It's not like you have to. Krishna says in the Gita, yoga is not for the one who eats too much or too little, and it's not for the one who sleeps too much or sleeps too little. So yoga is balance. So the body will need to rest. But you can get to such a state where your body goes to sleep and your mind stays awake. That's ideal. Your dreams are like heaven. See? Your dreams are like walking the skies, like the Buddha fields. See, we talked about that. Your body says, oh, it's got to sleep, so let it down. And your mind immediately departs the body and goes into the kingdoms of heaven, and it's having all these experiences while your body is back there on earth, just laying there, trying to recuperate itself. See? You're a walker of the skies. So, I have lulled sleep to sleep forever, my teacher used to say. I've made fear afraid of itself. I've put death in its own grave. He used to tell me that all the time. I've made sleep go to sleep. I've put sleep to sleep forever. So a man has come to me from a land that never sleeps. He talked about his guru, Swami Shardananda, that way. Stabilize the mind during unrest. Here we have, again, practice. Sparsha yoga, non-touch yoga. You've got all these practices you're doing. They're not so much outside anymore as they are inside, as we're understanding, right? But here is another thing, is that you awaken the mind and have samadhi, it doesn't mean that your mind isn't going to become unbalanced again. People have had samadhi even by accident. Sri Ramakrishna used to say worldly people sometimes have samadhi, but in their case it's the case of the blue lotus. Blue lotus opens up when the sun's out, but a cloud goes in front of it, it can't bear it, and it closes back up. So that's an ordinary person. See, when everything is rosy, then they're going to have this really powerful experience 1 year, or one lifetime, see. But phone rings, you're fired, and the slightest little thing comes, and they close right up again, and that samadhi didn't happen, and God doesn't exist, and that was just a phantasm of your mind, your psychologist told you. So, the mind can still fall out of balance. Even after having tasted samadhi, having seen God, it can still come back to earth and into the mind and into the brain and fall out of balance. So this is why your training and your practice in non-duality is important. Fine, so now you're a non-dualist. You're calling yourself a non-dualist. So now do the practice of non-duality. Let's see if you can maintain it. Because it doesn't look to me like you are. See? Your guru will tell you, what was that all about? What was that act you just did? What's that thought you just had? What are those words you just said to me? Why are you falling asleep in my class? You're still practicing non-duality, so fine, call yourself a non-dualist, but let's get busy and do the practice that maintains non-duality as a truth, because you're falling out of it. See? Father of Yoga says ekagra, and when you reach ekagra, it means one-pointed. If the mind is one-pointed all the time, it can get into samadhi. If you can't reach ekagra, there's 3 other states of mind, vikshipta, and muda, and kshipta. And those are mind that's sometimes distracted, sometimes balanced, mind that's dull, and mind that's restless. Actually, kshipta mind is actually unwell. Mind, it's so restless that, and it's not just restless mind as people have and still live good lives. It's sick. It's fragmented mind, and we're seeing it more and more out there. And pardon me for saying, in all walks of life. In walks of life where people are intelligent, we're beginning to see fragmented mind. Things that don't make sense, you see, they're not keeping it together. Business, politics, military, it's become unreasoned, pulled apart, so that it doesn't need to make sense anymore. So, back to the spiritual aspirant, thank God we are, then let's do the practice of non-duality, Advaita Vedanta sadhana, and hold this ideal high. Finally attain the goal, which is Brahman. I mean, basically, that's nicely put too here in one of Shankara, this Gaudapada's student. The great Shankara. So, now here's my worst fear. It's just surfaced. Depict Mayadaharpa's sprouted legs and run away.
On the table.
Ah, thank you. I'm better now. Back to practice of non-duality. So about this point here, attain the goal, Brahman, Shankara's, his student, Shankara, as Gaudapada's student, sings something like this. Yoga ratuva bhoga ratago sangha ratuva sangha vihinaha sasya brahmani ramate chittam nandati 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 evam bhaja govindam bhaja govindam mudhamate samprapte sanihite kale nahi rakshati dukrin karine. he sings. This is actually Nandagiri. Nandagiri, one of Shankar's students, added this verse to this great, beautiful Bhajagovindam stotram. He says here, practice concentration or indulge in sense enjoyment. Find your pleasure in company or find it in solitude. That one alone is happy, verily happy, whose mind dwells in Brahman all the time. So you can see that this non-duality is a philosophical or spiritual art, you might say, that if one has attained it and becomes evened out, it doesn't really matter then for what they do from then on. In fact, a lot of the yogis have said, you enjoy your food, good. I enjoy my food much more. Like Vivekananda would say, I get exquisite pleasure out of things. Exquisite pleasure when I do them. I get more juice out of my orange than you do. See? He told that to Nikola Tesla when he was at Nikola Tesla's house in Chicago, I think, or somewhere. So that kind of ability to extract the essence out of everything, it wouldn't just be food, but it would be a conversation with someone, you see, like Nikola Tesla. You'd get the essence out of that, and therefore show how yoga can actually express itself through the living being. Attain the goal, Brahman. Now, here are the results of non-touch yoga. A little quicker study than this, so we took a little more time on, but side by side you can see how the non-duality of Tibetan Buddhism, which was given straight from India across the Himalayas, when Marpa walked and gave it to Milarepa, and then Asparsha Yoga, which probably a couple hundred years, maybe 100 years before Marpa did that trek over the Himalayas, Gaudapada was fleshing out this karika, setting down the parameters for non-dualism for all time to come, until Vivekananda seized that, brought it here. So, results of the non-touch yoga, the fruits of non-dual practice. If you do this, very simply put, but remember it's a combination of some very simple practices that have to do with final purification of the mind. You may be a good moral person, you may have minded your P's and Q's, you may have only good karma left and so forth, but that's not going to get you into samadhi. There are good people born all the time who are bound into the body. There are virtuous people who have never heard the Dharma. So this is a whole different ideal that you're talking about, the fruits of spiritual life. So let's look at what some of these fruits are. Those being secure right knowledge. That's also one of the facets of Lord Buddha's Eightfold Path. Remember the Four Noble Truths? There is suffering. There's a cause for suffering. There's a way out of suffering, and here it is, the Eightfold Path, Ashtangika Marga. Much like Ashtanga Yoga of Patanjali, 700 years later, after Buddha. So this is one of the facets of that. Secures right knowledge. Samyak Jnana, Lord Buddha called it. Samyak Jnana, perfect knowledge. So that would be a fruit. You'd find out it's, of course, not just secular knowledge we're talking about. It's dharmic knowledge. Like Vedavyas. He had all the Dharma in his mind when that age was coming to an end. Vedanta was saved by him. 108 Upanishads were saved by Vedavyas because he had them all in his mind by memory. So he was sitting there, the age was ending. Ganesha, the elephant-headed god, was sitting next to him. And Ganesha said, Master, you should write all this down because the age is coming to an end. See what's happening? See who's president now? No, I'm sorry. So you better write this all down. So Vedavyas said, "Sir, that's my script, my parchment." "Oh, I don't have a pen. There's ink, parchment, but no pen." So Ganesha went, broke off his tusk. So if you see images of Ganesha, you'll see if they're accurate, unless it was before he helped Vedavyas write down the Upanishads, he's got one tusk. So he dipped that in this ink pot and wrote down all the scriptures. So a roundabout way or long way of saying that right knowledge was in the mind of Vedavyas. This wasn't just any knowledge. And if you went to him, you'd hear things that you've never heard before, explained in ways so clear that that it was stunning. Like sitting in front of Ramakrishna or Swami Vivekananda when they talked and lectured and so forth. Or me sitting in front of Swami Sheshananda, hanging on every word of his. I never got tired of hearing that man speak. My eyes never closed in front of him. My back never got crooked in front of him. I never slumped. I sat there and I listened to everything he said, rapt attention. That's what I'd wanted to hear all my life. And I had already spent 21, 22 years of that life hearing a bunch of drivel from people. A bunch of nonsense. Or having a bunch of crap facts from lower knowledge pushed down my throat so that I could go out and make money with it. Mother wisdom isn't supposed to be that way, as Ramakrishna said. You don't make money from mother wisdom. You learn it, and then she provides you with everything you need. You don't go seeking it. It's in the teaching called the Four Fruits of Life. I just gave him that chart yesterday to study. 4 fruits of life. You get Dharma first, study it, then she gives you artha, wealth, kama, satisfaction of your desires. And in the end,
liberation.
Moksha, liberation. So that's what we're studying here. Attain the goal, Brahman, freedom. So enough about secures right knowledge for now. Non-attachment via mature discernment comes to you. So you're going from very simple things here, aren't you? Although I explained them in a mental process way, to huge things. It's like this jump from desire and enjoyment to having samadhi. Poof. So here, all of a sudden, you're jumping from all these things that you thought, maybe are very simple things, and you've got them already. And when you do have them, all of a sudden, you get these fruits in heaven. You store up your fruits in heaven. You get things that the seers covet. These are things the seers covet. They don't covet things out in the world like most people do. If they hear about any of these, they say, I want that for myself. I want that. I want to own that. Beautiful story, a song in Prabhupada's collection of songs where he says, "O Mother, make me wealthy, make me infinitely wealthy with all your teachings, with all the knowledge you have. That's the wealth I want." So, with that knowledge, non-attachment via mature discernment comes. And if non-attachment came and went, as was the case we saw in some earlier descriptions, then it wasn't good. Your mind wasn't fully awake yet; it was slipping. But now, so you're upping the ante. You're raising the bar, and you're making the grade for that. So you are getting deeper insight, and some of these things are coming to you as divine attributes. Also, showers beneficent on all creatures. Beneficence. Showers beneficence on all creatures. So that's like Krishna doing to Arjuna in the Gita, or Gaudapada giving to his student, Govindapada, and Govinda giving it to Shankara. So this is happening all the time. And it's not just happening between disciple and guru. It's also happening guru shishya, but it's also happening between great souls coming to earth and giving this wisdom to fishermen or tax collectors, if you know what I mean. So making fishers of men out of people with this knowledge that awakens you, and it helps you attain the goal. Realization of the highest happiness comes upon you. You might call that bliss, unalloyed bliss. Sometimes you say nicely, There's happiness, there's contentment, there's peace, there's joy, there's elation, then there's bliss. So different degrees of that. See, but when they say highest happiness here, it means just like ultimate content, the peace that passes all understanding, elation based on knowing God, and so that's the highest of all things. That's bliss. They say there's an opposite to happiness, sorrow, but there's no opposite to Ananda. See, when you talk about Ananda, it doesn't have an opposite. It's the unalloyed bliss. Just like there can be peace and there can be restlessness or lack of peace, but the peace that passes all understanding, there's no other opposite to that. When it sets in, that's it. And you rest in it, you abide in it. Also, freedom from dispute and opposition. Interesting, because above here he says, I salute him on bended knee, who teaches the non-touch yoga for the benefit of all beings, free of compromise, superior and unopposed. So if you've come to that understanding of non-duality on that level, to that mature condition, then of course you're going to realize freedom from dispute or opposition. You won't even need to descend to any of that anymore. Gaudapada actually says that in his Karika. He says people may opine this and say this and that, their philosophy, like dualism, might be better, or qualified dualism. He said it doesn't matter. Non-duality stands unopposed, and it's the obvious truth. Nobody can contend it. And let them think how they will. We will take refuge in this highest of all ways of thinking, or as our founder Lexington said, not thinking. The highest of all not thinking. Transcendence of desire and non-desire. If you said, I've transcended desires, you'd think, wow, that's a great man, like Sri Ramakrishna, no lust, no anger, so forth. But if you say transcendence of desire and non-desire, that throws you a curve, you see. That gives you a little bit of a hint of what this non-duality really consists of, and why it's so subtle and inscrutable. And then you start to think about it, and this is going to give you deeper insights, as we said over here. Because non-desire, let's say, it could make you all work and no play makes Jack a very dull boy. You know, so if you have like no desires, but then you're resting in the idea of non-desire, then you might just be a very pallid person. You should be beyond desire and non-desire, and that would be where bliss would be, because there's no opposite competing against the other. Just like before that, there's no need to dispute or have opposition because you've already attained that state. And so you're at peace, peace, peace. Finally, culmination of all processes in Brahman. I like that very much. All processes, and this level would be mental. But karmic processes are also impeding people. Usually by the time you get to a high level of practice in non-duality, or at least a good intellectual understanding of non-duality, then basically your processes are already winding down. The test of that, test of the pudding, would be whether you're going to be reborn again in this tradition. Are you going to take another body in ignorance? Even in subtle ignorance? Do you have any slight tendrils of desire left? Do you want to come back here? Do you want to have children again? So this is one of the acid tests of Hinduism and Vedanta and yoga and so forth. Is nature is the name and form producing machine. Nature, at its subtlest, is unmanifested. Seeds, deep sleep. That's nature. You're just seeing a tip of the iceberg out here. This nature, planets, stars, that's the tip of the iceberg. That's the solidified nature. The seeds it came from are much vaster. So, can you go into that field of seeds and not water them anymore? No more pumpkin patches, see. no more watermelons, no more forests, no more attachments to any form of any kind, including human. Because back here, didn't we say you needed to get beyond your attachments? Moderate desire and enjoyment and so forth. So if there's any vestige of that left in you, that's, like I say, kind of the fine line. Do I have to be reborn again? And I'm going to be drugged back into the body. I asked my mother that when she was passing from the body. She was taking care of her at our house, and I said, "Mother, you can leave the body now. It's okay. We'll all be fine. Go ahead." And so I said, "Just, think of leaving the body and in deep sleep tonight. Open your third eye. Be conscious." So a couple of days later, she said, "I almost did it. Last night, I think I did. I almost did it. I saw how I could get out of the body and do it consciously." And so I said, "Good. Keep trying that. You see." And so a couple months passed. I said, "Well, what do you think it is?" I asked her, "that's keeping you in the body." She said, "My children." I said, "Why is that?" I said, they're grown and they can take care of themselves." She said, "I'm interested in what they do in life. I want to see what they do." So here is a final vestige of desire in her, is to have that kind of... But I told her, you get outside the body, you can see everything. You'll be able to look in on them and you'll see what horrible things they're doing, as well as what good things they're doing. And you might not want to get back in the body again. So either way, you're going to win. Just get out of the body consciously. And do it consciously like you would do meditation. I mean, Vivekananda said, the minute we're born, we're rushing towards death. And this is how he thought. It's not morbid, it's not pessimistic, it's a fact. The minute we're born, we're rushing towards death. So how many breaths do I have to take? How many more? How many more billions of breaths am I going to take? How many more flood of days is the sun god going to allot to me before it's my last day? And I'll have to look back on all those days the sun god gave me and lit my eyes and lit the landscape for me. And I'm going to have to drop the body right there. Swami Paramananda, beautiful Swami down in South California, passed away, one of Vivekananda's students, disciples, monk brothers, was out in the field with a woman, devotee, walking, and all of a sudden he fell. And then he regained his consciousness, stood back up, took a few more steps, and fell dead. But as he took the few more steps, he said, "I see it, I see it." So, he died, but for her benefit, he came back and to let her know, I'm sure he said, "I see the third eye. I'm going out the third eye." Yogis exit out of this place. So, third eye or bust. But if you can even awaken in the heart or here, they say you won't have to come back to physical body. The three lower chakras are the realm of heaven, earth, and hell, and beings return to those. They exit out those chakras and they enter back in. The Tibetan Buddhists can tell you all about this. I'm using Vedantic language, but they've explored that, Bardos, and saw how souls exited and entered. First, they did it themselves. So that's important. Well, I have to have my first conscious birth. First conscious death. Because in Buddhism, basically, the idea is you have one lifetime to see your karma, one lifetime to dispel it, and one lifetime to live free. So in order to get to that third free lifetime, you're going to have to see your karma and get rid of it. So that means, obviously, makes sense, you're going to have your first conscious death. See? Free of what? Fear. I'm not the body. I'm not the ego. See? No fear for me. I'm Brahman. How deeply is the non-duality ingrained in you? How deeply did you listen to your teacher? How deeply do you believe it? How much faith do you have in it? Can you manage it at the time of your last breaths? And so, can you just remain in yoga, balanced? Did you do your practices? Are you even-minded? Are you free with free of all your attachments for every little thing, or every big thing? Because a lot of people come back again right away just to continue making money, things like that. Big business. See, I've got to come back, be born in that family again, so I can inherit what I made last lifetime. See, I mean, that's what's going on everywhere here. And not many people think of it that way or see it or will acknowledge it. But they're into it, fully into it. They're invested in it, pun intended. So, culmination of all processes in Brahman is very important. You must wind it all down and be done with it. And say, this is it, my last lifetime. And do the practices that will help you free yourself from any vestiges of taking on form again. If you are to come back again, then let it be at the behest of your mother, see, your divine mother. No, not your earthly mother. She'll want to bring you back as many times as she can. But your divine mother, you see. So whether I take another lifetime or not, I want to have meditated on Vajravahini and seen her in all women, like Sri Ramakrishna saw Kali in all women. So if I've made my peace with the Shakti power that causes beings to come and go, then I can come and go free of ignorance. And that's really if you're free of ignorance when you're born, you're not born. It's as simply as you can put it. If you're free of ignorance when you're born, you're not born. And you won't die. So birth and death is all outer. That's why they call death an illusion in my tradition. It's an illusion. It doesn't happen. And neither does birth. It's all of the body. So invest in the body, that's what you have. You don't have these fruits. You have physical fruits. And we're all too familiar with those, and we're all too tired of them. It's called world weariness in my tradition. World weariness. So you'll know that last lifetime I'm saying is that when you don't have a desire to be brought back again for any reason, then you can heave your last breath, you see, and the last breath is H-A, That's the last thing you'll do, is you won't have another in-breath. You slough off the mortal coil. So you want to do that with this open. Or at least this open. The devotees go to these beautiful heavens, like Manidvipa or Kailas for Shiva, or Vaikuntha for Vishnu. They'll go to these very, you can't even call them heavens anymore. They're just these lokas. Yeah, there they sport with this divine form that they love, they most love. But there are deeper and deeper levels. So I think we've probably reached about the end here, or I don't want to take up another chart yet. It looks like we could just start right off with Mahamudra next class, which is that great seal of emptiness and luminosity combined. Beautiful way of explaining, kind of consummating these charts, the information and teachings on these two charts. But let's read this final quote then by Gaudapada. Where there is no thought, when there is no taking up, no giving up, at that time Atma-gyan, wisdom of the soul, is well set in itself and non-originated. Remaining equal. This is verily what is known as the non-touch yoga by name, very difficult of realization by ordinary yogis. ordinary yogis aren't ordinary people, let's put it that way. So if you've got the ordinary yogas who are fairly attained, they've got a lot of teachings under their belt, as it were, and a lot of wisdom, it's going to be very hard for them to attain this non-touch yoga, he's saying. So that's why he says back here, I salute the best of beings who teach this non-touch yoga, who have mastered it. And here he uses the famous word, non-originated, ajati. So that way we have his student singing this, and we'll end with this. Om Nam Ritur Shankam Name Jati Beda Pita Naiva Me Naiva Mata Majanma Chirananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham Chirananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham. Says, I have no mother, I have no father, I have no death, because never a birth had I. Instead, I am pure consciousness, pure knowledge, pure bliss. I am Shiva, I am Shiva. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat.